Ask Hillary shapes culture by combining art and science into purposeful concepts, strategies, and tactics to bolster results in a number of ways. Let's listen in as Hillary discusses effective communication.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining me here today. I'm here to talk about communication, the importance of it, and when you bring it into your organization in a way that's meaningful and relevant, the extra that you'll get out of the people that work for you. Strong communication can change the morale in your organization, it can change your company revenue, and it can change productivity. Have you ever played the game telephone? I did when I was younger. And when you play that game, if you were the person who started, you know that the message that you started with is oftentimes not the message that you got back. Sound bites are how oftentimes we communicate today. And it means that we have to think even harder in an effort to build the communication patterns that we need to get the responses and input that we want out of what we're giving out. Well, communication happens in three big segments on how people actually hear it. The verbal word, which is actually 7% of how you actually communicate. The other two portions of communication come through body language and tone. So if you think about email, you lose body language and tone. And if you're like most people, email in today's business environment is your number one method of communication. So you've lost 93% of the opportunity to communicate with your audience. Here are some of the stats that support that. 71% of employees will tell you that their manager hasn't given them enough information to meet the goals and plans of their organization. So if this is the situation, what do you think you can do to change the face of communication in your organization?
Let's now hone in on what Hillary calls always communication, when an audience, a channel, and a message all come together.
The simple process that we use and introduce to people in an effort to communicate better is a three-part process that we call always communication. So from all directions, we're bringing communication together. When your audience and the message and the channels can all come together as one, that's when you're running on all cylinders.
Listen as Hillary provides an example of a company that embraces always communication.
They're located in the United States. 50% of their workforce and revenues are driven through the US. The other 50% come through global. And when I sit in on their quarterly all-employee meetings, the first one that I sat in on, I looked at the agenda, I listened to the presenters. At the end of the meeting, I'm thinking, wow, 85% of this presentation was dedicated to the US workforce. But the US workforce only made up 50% of the population that was on the call. How do you think the other 50% felt? By the time they were talking about the 15% of the agenda that would have been important to them, they'd already checked out. They were on a different page. The second piece when it comes to always communicating is thinking about your message. And when you bring a message that is consistent, it's aligned with your company objectives, you eliminate the jargon that so many of us use day to day that leaves other people out, you can increase the message being heard. How many times I'm with a senior leader and they say to me, I already told them that. And I look at them and say, okay, how long have you been struggling with this issue? How long have you and the senior leadership team been working on this? And they'll say to me, oh, well, 90 days ago, we started this. And then we reshaped it and thought about it and did that. And so 90 days later, they're presenting it to the workforce. It's the first time the workforce is hearing it. And they think that in one snap, they're going to get it. It takes 7 times for the average person to hear a new piece of information and then actually be able to process it to try to put it into play. Flavor of the day, which is another thing that I hear all too often. Oh, 2 weeks ago, they told me this. And now they've told me this. So I'm not really going to worry about it because guess what? In 2 more weeks, it'll be something different. So if you can figure it out before you actually try to bring it out publicly so that you don't have that flavor of the day mentality, because once you earn it, it's hard to get rid of it. When people know what to expect and when they're going to get it, it's much easier for them to stay on task. So it's a lot of detail to communicate well and make sure that the messages are heard throughout the organization. And I've talked about the 3 different big buckets: audience, messaging, and channels. Another is making sure you're closing communication loops, and this is one of the biggest gaps that I see in organizations. I'll use an example of when I've been embedded in a hospital and clinic setting for about 3 years. And in the beginning of the relationship, they asked me to attend their senior leadership meeting. The goal in attending the meeting was, tell us how we're communicating. And all of a sudden, I saw 7 heads looking at each other and going, whoa, we haven't discussed them at all. And really, who did take care of them? When you're intentional, it's a lot easier to be successful. Things that you could walk out of here and try to do in a heartbeat, not try to change the whole environment, change your corner of the world, and let it start to filter out as you build a bigger plan. Closing the communication loops so that you have ownership and responsibility. People will also feel really proud when they've accomplished something and they know that somebody else is depending on them to actually get it done, and they're going to be asked about it. Increasing the face-to-face communication will buy you more than you can imagine. And there's no question, it will take you time, it will take you energy. These are all resources that are limited in every environment.
Now you've seen a glimpse into how Ask Hillary's big picture thinking combined with down-to-earth ideas produces award-winning results.